So yeah, 500 calorie deficit equals 1 pound of loss a week, bro. You have to say bro at the end because it makes it sound more scientific. So this is the biggest thing we will hear on the internet, and it sort of gives people false beliefs or like limiting beliefs where what they'll get, and if they don't reach it, people will just straight away blame themselves. So who's heard of, I've already said this anyway, but for the recording, who's heard of, or if, because I can't spell, of a 500 calorie deficit, you'll lose 1 pound a week, and it's just as easy as calories in versus calories out. And this can sort of set some people up for failure, because if it doesn't happen, like there's so many reasons why it doesn't happen, but people will just like automatically blame themselves. So I've made this very research based, more on the sense of it's probably going to be better knowledge or better information rather than just going off what I personally think or have experienced. So there's a guy that we have met quite a few times, Bill Campbell, and he is like a fat loss researcher in Florida, South Florida State University. I don't know what the exact name of that university is called, but it's somewhere in Florida. So he did let's move my head out of the way. So he did a study where all the participants were resistance trained, males and females. They weren't obese, because if you have someone who is obese, they should generally lose weight quicker. And then you'd have to have everyone of a similar weight. But I think it was easier for them to have people that were relatively fit. So they know what they're doing, because these people come into a lab and were given and made weight calorie deficit programs and weight training programs. So all the participants were put on a 10-week diet with 25% reduction from their maintenance calories. So it's relevant to each person's weight, because 500 calories less for me probably isn't that much, but 500 calories less for someone that's like 100 pounds would maybe be like 40% of their intake. Like it'd be a lot higher. They also had them to consume 2 grams of protein per day. So they were all on the same sort of calorie deficit. They all did the same resistance training program. They all ate the same amount of protein. I think they had very similar daily activity based on steps, but all of their fat loss was massively variable. So they should have all technically lost X amount of weight per week, but they didn't. Some people lost 9 kilos of fat. I'm guessing they probably body fat tested them, so they can say this, like they didn't lose 9 kilos of weight. This is saying they lost 9 kilos of fat, while others lost 1 kilo. So this is how unfair the world can be, and why you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, where some people will say, I'm exactly the same weight, I maybe even do the same job and program, and I eat the same calories, but they've lost double than me. Like it's very possible and very easy to happen. So this is just like a study that can highlight what the point that we're trying to make. So the main reasons on why a 500 calorie deficit rule is just an inaccurate rule. It's very like broad and general, but I think it can do more damage to people sort of getting into health and fitness. And like I say a lot, it will just make you feel like you've done everything wrong when you haven't, and you probably just need to be a bit more consistent and just sort of find out the reasons why. So here's about 5 or 6 points on why this isn't an accurate way of doing it. So calorie absorption, just because you eat it doesn't mean you absorb absolutely everything you eat. This will come down to like your gut microbiome that Shelby will be able to speak in way more detail than me. But just to put it very simply, even if 2 people eat the same amount of calories and you ate the exact same foods, their bodies will absorb it in different amounts. So you say you had a 500 calorie muffin, I don't know, you don't automatically absorb and have 500 calories. Even if there was an identical twin, I'd be very surprised if they would absorb exactly the same, because like there's so much variation in how healthy our gut health can be, how much gut microbiome you can have in the good and in the bad. Like the variation will change a lot. So firstly, just because you ate 2,000 calories and your mate ate 2,000 calories doesn't mean you've absorbed 2,000 calories. So it's already different to how do people actually know they're in a calorie deficit when what they think they're eating isn't 100%. So the next one is what's called metabolic adaptation. So this is where the body slows metabolism as a protective mechanism in a prolonged calorie deficit, which, to be honest, is most people because we just want to get to our goal. So over time, your body is going to start to make different changes within the body. So you're like, I think the next one is like fidgeting less. So that's like a prime example. But as your metabolism slows down, your body becomes more efficient at functioning on fewer calories, meaning a 500 calorie deficit is no longer a 500 calorie deficit because you've been doing it for so long. The body has made changes physiologically and physically and unconsciously where you don't fidget or you just don't move as much. So you're just going to burn less calories moving over. So I've gone to the next one. Yeah, cool. So this basically leads on to NEAT. And NEAT can generally be more subconscious than it is conscious. People say if you go for a walk, that is already planned exercise technically because you're planning it and you're like planned it and done it. But NEAT is more like non-exercise activity thermogenesis is what it stands for. So as the body starts to be in a calorie deficit for longer, it will start to slow its processes down. So if you'll fidget less, like you'll talk less, you'll lean against the wall. Like the biggest thing when I used to do cuts for when I used to fight for Thai boxing, I would always know close towards the end that when I used to do personal training, I'd never sit down. If I was with a client, I'd obviously always stand. But as I'd get closer into this deficit and I'd lost quite a lot of weight, like 5-6% of my body weight, I'd then just inherently sit down. Like if they were sitting down, I would sit down next to them. And that in itself, if I did that across 6-7 hours a day of PTs and I sit down way more, I'm burning way less calories per day. And I didn't really notice it until about a couple of years in that I would sit down at a certain point when I've been doing it for so long. So it's not something you can always really pick up on, but that's why we try to work it out by using steps just as a general indicator of how much movement or how much NEAT you have within a day. And that's probably one of the only ways we can really objectively look at it. Otherwise, it'd just be sort of guessing and remembering. So what this means for like your 500 calorie deficit is in different studies, they've found significantly found that people with a higher NEAT levels burn more calories without exercise than some people that did exercise. So this is quite a good thing to remember. We will find people that are really active that do not go to the gym and they'll lose more weight because they consistently burn more calories across a day and across a week. Whereas Tina, that goes to a gym 3 times a week, absolutely kills herself, does lots of like deadlifts and squats, and then she can't walk for the rest of the day. So she now has like literally half her daily output of energy and steps. So although she's done 3 hard workouts, we know we don't burn that much working out. Like it's good for lots of reasons, but for burning pure calories, weightlifting isn't great. But again, that's not why we do it anyway. So that Tina, her overall calorie burn by the end of the week is less than Viv, that has been walking lots and just been generally active. She does housework every day, every hour, and doesn't seem like it's inherently hard, but she's literally consistently moving more across a day. She burns more calories, so she'll probably lose more weight towards the end. So this is why it's a big thing of like 500 calories. People say they're burning 500 calories, but your body becomes more efficient. So as you get fitter, stronger, if you run, your technique gets better. So your body burns less calories. And obviously, as we diet, our body gets smaller. We burn less calories. So this 500 calorie deficit is pretty much a moving needle all the time for so many different reasons. So yeah, if a person's NEAT decreases, less movement overall, less calories burned overall, probably slower fat loss or zero fat loss. So that's how quickly it can affect it. And to be honest, this is probably the biggest one that I reckon will have the biggest dent in most people. So when we say get your steps in because it is well worth it. So your diet, like the breakdown of the food that you eat. I don't know if everyone knows it, but we'll mention it a few times. Like you can burn up to like 30% of the calories from protein. If you ate pure 100 calories of just pure protein, you could burn up to 30 calories of that digesting it. So that's why people with higher protein have a higher thermic effect of food. So they burn more calories eating that food. Again, it comes down to the absorption rate. It doesn't exactly mean you've had 500 calories. If someone's had like a really low protein diet and someone's had a really high protein diet, they're going to burn more calories just digesting it. It's small and it's minimal, but every day for the next 8 to 12 weeks, that could add up to 1,000 calories compared to person A that eats like really low protein diet across a 12-week period. And all these little numbers will add up. So that's one way it will change your 500 calorie deficit. The next thing is it helps to preserve muscle mass, especially in a calorie deficit. So if we go hard enough and we do enough exercise, we can sort of tip the scales where the body will start to push into burning muscle. And we don't want that because if we have less muscle mass, we burn less calories overall. So people on the same calorie deficit can experience different fat loss results based on the macronutrient intake. So basically the reasons above of why protein will burn more calories within digestion compared to a high protein diet and a low. People that can maintain muscle mass who strength train, they're not doing it to burn the most amount of calories, they're strength training to maintain muscle mass in a calorie deficit. They will burn more calories at rest across a longer period, like months and years, compared to the person that yo-yo diets, does not do any resistance training, only does cardio. They'll probably lose chunks of muscle every time they diet. So every time they go back to dieting, they have to generally diet lower each time than they did the last time. And one of the reasons is because they're losing muscle mass and they're not regaining it once they leave that fat loss phase. The next thing, that is probably, it's just the last one. No, second to last one. So we're getting there. I'll try to keep this short, but I think I talk too much. Is your dieting history. So this would be like the biggest thing. So I've put like just the actual meaning of leptin and what it does so people can understand it. So when we say frequent dieting slows down fat loss due to hormonal changes, and you're like, well, what hormonal changes? So one of the biggest ones is going to be leptin. So leptin is your satiety or your fullness cue. This is the one that's going to tell you like you've had enough, stop right there, you don't need to eat anymore. Like that's basically what it's going to do. But how they would officially say it is when you consume a meal and you've had enough to eat, the fat cells produce leptin and releases into the bloodstream. The rise in leptin tells your brain you've had enough, reducing the desire to eat. So basically you start to feel full. If we've got really, what does it say? So if your leptin levels are really high, or no, opposite, they're really low, you're not going to get that signal as often as you may did before when you're dieting. So it's easier to overeat. So someone that's on a 500 calorie deficit that has been dieting for years on and off, had massive spikes in weight gain, weight loss, their leptin levels are going to be different to someone else's, or different to yours, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a lot easier to overconsume and have those sneaky snacks of like peanut butter, like, I don't know, a cookie here and there. You've had some liquid calories, and that again will take you out of a 500 calorie deficit and slow everything down. So let me move the heads up here. So the takeaway is someone who has a history of frequent dieting may have a harder time losing fat, even with the same calorie deficit as someone who has not dieted much before. They will find it easier to overeat rather than someone before. So again, overeating is literally probably the biggest thing, and that's what will happen. So if you have more fat cells because you've been obese, would you have higher leptin levels? So fat cells do stay around. People do say you can get rid of them. That's probably a good Shelby question. So if you have more fat cells because you've been obese, would you have higher leptin levels? I would probably say yes, but I couldn't guarantee you that answer. Shelby there?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yes, but it also kind of depends on the person. But a lot of times, yeah, that's usually what happens. There is actually like a disease. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it can cause this to happen too, where essentially you don't have like leptin in your body doesn't actually work. So you can't really tell when you're full. I think it's called Prader-Willi syndrome. So that is like a random fact. That is like actually a thing where you don't have leptin. It doesn't actually work. But when you are obese, sometimes those leptin levels can be a little bit higher. But it also just kind of depends on the person too.
That's it. That's why it's always like the hardest thing to say for definites, but like it is out there. But yeah, so that's like the interesting fact of why some people just inherently overeat, and some people are like born with it. They can be born with just really low or even zero. I don't know if people can be born with zero, but I know you can get like leptin medication to help reverse it. So the next one, let's move the heads. So resistance training. By now, we should know what it does. It's going to help preserve muscle, which help in turn give you a higher metabolism / metabolic rate. So you burn more calories at rest. Losing muscle can slow down your metabolism because muscle tissue burns more calories than fat tissue, again, at rest. So it's like your BMR, RMR. So a study has showed that resistance training combined with a calorie deficit led to better fat loss outcomes compared to like calorie restriction alone. So basically, if it's prolonged over a longer time, depending how hard you do a calorie deficit or how hard you diet, if they're losing muscle with it, then it's going to slow down fat loss because it's not preserving it, it's losing muscle and it's using muscle as energy. But if we are preserving muscle mass, it's going to have to turn to and use fat mass more. So it's always been shown in quite a lot of studies, resistance training paired with a calorie deficit will generally get better results across the board. So yeah, it's like the takeaway, people who lift weights while dieting tend to preserve more muscle mass, which can lead to more fat mass. Oh my, someone's entered the room. Okay. Then rather just dieting or doing cardio alone. So yeah, when people are like cardio bunnies, they'll lose muscle quicker and that'll sort of speed up the process of lowering your metabolism for the next time. So why the 500 calorie deficit rule isn't accurate? Calorie absorption, metabolic adaptation, the body will become more efficient at exercising. You just you burn less calories doing what you've always done. Neat, you'll move less subconsciously. Exercise type, are you just, what do we call it? Just doing cardio, so you maybe speed up the rate of muscle that you'd lose, or are you doing resistance training? Macro split, are people eating really high protein or really low protein? Like that's the biggest thing. You still get more carbs and fats, but that's the biggest probably dent you'll see it from previous diet and history and potentially different leptin levels. So it's easier to overeat and never really feel satiated. Obviously, your starting body composition, the more fat we have, if two people dieted and one had way more fat and one had less, then that's going to have a big difference in how much you'd lose per week. Hormonal responses, so we've talked about hunger, but of course there's a lot of other ones. Medical conditions, hypothyroidism, PCOS, insulin resistance are all going to have effects on the rate of weight loss as well.